My name is Charlie Clough, and I live under a stone. I live under a stone. So I'm grateful to Margaret and Dorothy and the Delaware Art Museum for giving me a platform and for actually an audience. So thank you all for coming here and being with me. I take artist and citizen really seriously. I tried out for art school in high school, and I got in. And I've always felt like I've been an artist. Probably all of you feel that way also. But at a certain point on January 5th, 1971, I had a vision of really being an artist, like Michelangelo, like Rubens, like I felt challenged. And I dropped out of Pratt, and I began working with an artist in Buffalo who, another guy that didn't go to art school. He was wealthy. He sold his father's factory and got an art facility that's actually depicted in the exhibition here. Very interesting circumstance. Anyway, I wanted to declare my artisthood to the Buffalo community by way of this arrow. It took me an hour and a half. It took me a year and a half to get it together, in an hour and a half, to do this prank at the Albright Knox Art Museum. I made this arrow out of plywood or masonite, I forget, and I put it there on Halloween Eve, what do you call it, Beggar's Night, in 1972. And of course they threw it away the next day, but it did get into the local newspaper, and thus I was an artist in Buffalo. And the thing is, like, I'm kind of grandiose in my imagination. So I really feel like that the fact that art gives character to society was part of the challenge. And so the goal of critique is to disclose in a better way the nature of society itself. Well, you know, as citizens, of course, you know, we've got our rights, our freedoms, but we also have our responsibilities, where our social, what do you call it, the social contract that we need to execute. It took me 5 years of playing around with my art to get behind the wall. These eyes that I glued onto the walls at this art facility that I mentioned, I felt like I got behind the picture plane in 1975. And down the line, you'll see where I pop back out. Part of the revelation to me, let me back up. One of my teachers at Pratt showed us Art Forum magazine in 1969. And it opened the door to the commercial art world. That there is contemporary art, there are people that collect it, people that support it, museums that support it. It's a cool thing. Bruce Nauman he's still alive, 85 years old, he's still alive. And this, the true artist helps the world by revealing mystic truths. Well, you know, like, the spiritual thing is really important to me. I will say that, maybe the next thing segues. Yeah, kind of. The big issues of, say, the true, the good, and the beautiful, it's something I wanted to embody. And so, in making my work, you know, there's the problem of, you know, form and content. I'm kind of a formalist, but I have these values that I want to project. So I'm basically repackaging old ideas. You know, Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, along with, do I have the next, well, that's not where I thought I was going to go. That's okay. in any case, the true, the good, and the beautiful, centered through head, heart, and hands, is my content. And I call that, can I go back? Yeah, I can go back. Okay, human essence. Human essence is, if you Google it, there's a company a public relations company in England that's using human essence. And it's because you know, when you say the human, you think, well, okay, it's that guy over there. To turn humanist into a noun, I guess, is how I'm using human essence. I'm putting traditional content into new form. I mean, one of the things that's interesting to me is, in art you see change. Is there progress? In society, well, technology is really easy. You can see progress, you know, horse replaced by the car. Easy. In society, well, slavery's been outlawed. That's progress. If peace were to happen, that would be progress. I am for progress within the context of human essence. Now, I mentioned as a formalist, like, well, how do I make that connection? I mean, here's one of my paintings, and there's no intrinsic connection between the true, the good, and the beautiful, and my messy paint. But I'm telling you right now, the meaning of this painting is human essence. Many of you are photographers here. In 1976, I determined my job description as to make the photographic epic of a painter as a film or a ghost. And I find the painterly as a tradition to be really cool. You know, you think of Turner, or you think of the Impressionists, or you think of de Kooning, Richter. You know, there's something going on in mushy paint that expresses something that words will not do. So I as a painter, I fulfill the painterly. As a photographer, I document my process. And this film or a ghost idea is that every frame of all the work that I've made, whether it's paintings, objects, or photos, if they're sequenced, they're a movie. You know, this is something I got from at UB Media Studies, Hollis Frampton, Stan Brakhage, that kind of thing. And, you know, time-based media is something that museums have been dealing with, you know, increasingly. And it's, you know, the Marcel Duchamp show right now is important to me because he was my first relationship. And what I mean by that is Duchamp was the first artist that I studied in depth, and I got the sense that the oeuvre is the thing. The body of work is, that's what the artist makes. And to capture the entire body of work, well, if you could do that in 24 frames per second times 10,000, 20,000 images, you know, or you got a 15-minute movie or something. Anyway, when I'm dead, my grandkids, I'm gonna make them put this film together. So hold your breath, and when all that stuff goes down, you can see the movie. Okay, so I like abstraction because it is universal. It is, you know, I think of museums that lack a universal appeal, and I'm just saying, I work abstractly because I hope for a broad appeal in terms of color and gesture and so on. And groundedness through materiality, you know, in the age of digital everythingness, to work with paint, to work with food, to work with crafts, to work with objects, to work with materiality, I think is critical to how we move into the future. And in essence, well, you know, we're all gonna become evanescent someday. In terms of activism, in terms of CETA, frankly, when I dropped out of school, it was because I was impatient with academia. And I was impatient with being a student. I wanted to be the artist. And to proceed that way, I realized that I could use my experiences of institutions, in Buffalo and New York City and Toronto. I spent a year at school in Toronto and saw this place called A-Space become what was known as alternative spaces. In New York now, there is still White Columns and PS1 and Artist Space were all part of this movement in the from the early 70s, which I saw this stuff going on and thought, I can plug into this. I can catch the wave into the art world if I work this properly. Buffalo had resources which were the Albright Knox. Now it's the Buffalo AKG Art Museum. You give them some money, they change the name. And there was also media studies at the University of Buffalo, which was groundbreaking, independent American cinema, European avant-garde cinema, etc. There was Art Park in Lewiston, New York, near Niagara Falls, which was an incredible publicly funded art program. Hall walls happened because of this fertile ground of the Ashford Hollow Foundation, the rich guys thing, that we were ostensibly renting studio space. Well, we didn't pay any rent, and we convinced the landlord, the artist, that we would do this programming that would bring attention to, his place, his thing. And so Robert Longo in particular was somebody that I met at this building, the building that's in the show upstairs. And there was a community. Our institution grew out of kind of nothingness, but there was a wonderful context that I just described, and we started a program of visiting artists that mimicked what A-Space did in Toronto, and it launched Longo and Cindy Sherman and a bunch of other people who aren't as well known. So this wave that we created, we followed it down to New York City and forged our careers. Hall Walls continues. It just had its 50th anniversary recently, and as some of the people that participate, they talk about the congregation of Hall Walls, that there's an artist community, much as I'm sensing here in the presentations today, that every community, I think there's these concerned citizens, art people, photographers, painters, performing arts, etc. Anyway, that's what that represented. I do like working with the public. I have this sense that you can do it too, in the way that I felt like, sure, I can be Michelangelo. And I appeal to everybody that you can make a mess with paint, and it can be uplifting and actually good for you, and you can aspire to like insane ambition, like being Michelangelo. So from 2012, I ran a couple of different types of Clough public painting workshops. This is at Art Oh My in Ghent, New York. Long story there, but anyway, and I did a thing. I moved to my mother's town, East Aurora, New York, which is interesting because there's a thing there called the Roycroft, which was an arts and crafts manifestation from 100 years ago, where this head, heart, and hands thing was a critical concept to a man called Albert Hubbard, who stole William Morris's ideas and turned them into an art industry in the Buffalo area around 1900. And at the Roycroft, which is a National Historic Landmark, where I made my studio because it was near where my mother lived, where I was taking care of her, and I could invite people into my studio and make paintings. So there were Clough places. There were only 3 of them. The one at Art Oh My, and there was one at the Albright Knox did a public art project. It was actually an ongoing thing where I did one of these with a local library, and in an ongoing fashion, each season I had a single painting, and I'd get as many people to paint out the painting as I could through the course of the season. I photographed everybody, I photographed their state of the painting, and at the end of the season, I would grind through the layers to produce the final work. I also would take the documentation and make an art history book to include all of the participants in art history. I ran that until 2024, when the Roycroft took back some of their space. And it was a house of cards. I mean, I ran this on fumes, and when the fumes evaporated, there was no way for me to proceed. And so I returned to New York to further my career. Ha ha ha. As I say, I've been living under a stone. It's been, you know, back in the 80s, there was a crest, a wave, wrong way. Here's the thrilling conclusion. You know, for me, I have my phases. Research and development, efflorescence was in the 80s. A friend of mine said, "Oh, you were an 80s artist." I was an 80s artist. Oh shit. It's like, like Soho in the 80s, Cindy Sherman getting famous, Robert Long getting famous. I did MTV. Does anybody remember what MTV was? I did MTV spots. I sat next to Keith Haring at the MTV Awards. I stood next to Jean-Michel Basquiat at Dean and DeLuca and shot the shit with him. And so yeah, it was like glamour in the 80s, and then the 90s came along, and it's like, sayonara. I'll try to keep the profanity down, I'm sorry. So rustication is my wife and I got a place in Rhode Island. I mean, we still had a place in New York, but I was out in nature. It was wonderful. I did a lot of work. It was good. And then the 2008 economic situation made it so we couldn't really continue that. And that coincided with my mother needing care in East Aurora. So that's when Tenacious Resilience, also known as the Clough Public Painting Workshop, came into being, and then that died. So now I'm old, in case you couldn't tell, and denouement is my scenario these days, as we've sold our place in New York to get the nest egg to get us through to the thrilling conclusion. And that's probably a good way to stop. Oh, no, it's not. Okay, intergenerationality is what's worth working towards. Couple of concepts. In the 90s, I ran into this Chinese concept of the absolute. And in reading Paul Tillich, he talked about ultimate concern. And trying to get a grip on Hegel, I realized there's this concept of Geist, spirit. Anyway, those 3 concepts come together for me in a way that I call my imaginary friend the all-time top 1,000 artists. These people live in my head. They are my conscience. They are my parental voice saying, what are you doing with your life? You know, do you have values? So this idea of human essence and like, am I meaningful? Can I make meaning? It's critical to me. So intergenerationality means that's the only thing that redeems the fact that I have to sell art. These books here, they're the complete Clough. There are 1,000 paintings. I've sold, I don't know, 20% of them. The rest are for sale. Step right up. Human Essence in Warwick. My wife and I moved to Warwick, New York to be near our grandkids. And this book documents this period. And as I say, they're for sale. They're out in the car. Anybody want to get touch, available. That's what I'll end. So thank you. I'm grateful to have a platform and recognition, and I've had a great life. I'm fulfilled. Thank you.